And that was a track from the original score of the Whalebone Box, filmed by Andrew Curtin. Came out this year, and the score was composed by Andrew Curtin, Oliver Chera and Riz Maslan, and that track was called Sealed Orders. And I'll be talking to Oliver and Riz about that and other work, including the sort of super group they formed called Non-Blank, where they perform live in front of screenings of classic films. So that's later on in the show. But before that... Radio Scarborough. Radio Scarborough.
Radio Scarborough. It's where we live.
So, welcome to On Film with Robin Hayter. That's me. This is actually going to be the last one. I've done 5 so far. This is number 6. Each week we've done a different aspect of film. And this week, I thought it'd be a nice idea to look at music and film, whether that be scores or interpretations adapted to film, or video games, or performing in front of a live screen, whatever. And my first guest this week is Jordan Mallory Skinner, who is a sound designer and a composer. Jordan goes under the name of Roshman for his musical projects, and that was a track you just heard from it. The track was called Throm, from the first album by the same name, Roshman. I've seen other stuff that he's been getting up to past few years. I'm quite interested to talk to him. So welcome to On Film, Jordan.
Cheers, thanks for having me.
I think I'll start the story sort of in reverse, really. Recently, I saw a clip, a short piece, which sort of caught my eye, whether it was on, I can't remember whether it was on Instagram or Facebook, but I know that you put the music to it because you'd mentioned your involvement in it. And it kind of captured something of how it seemed very much kind of the sort of thing that I sort of see you as doing these days, kind of a sort of soundscape ambient type thing, I think. But anyways, I really enjoyed it. And I wonder if you tell me how it came about. And was the film made first and then you contributed to it, or how did it work? And what's actually in it? Because I can't find the clip at the moment.
That was so a friend of mine called Geordie Leyland. He's a director, and I worked with him quite a few times years ago in this theatre company, because I'm the resident composer for this company, who has a bunch of associate artists, and he's one of the associate artists, so he's acted in a lot of the shows, and I've made music for a lot of those shows. And so after that, we became fast friends, and he kept making films. He did a film a while ago with like Bill Oddie for like this kind of like charity thing, and then he's now been doing a bunch of these short films kind of for like, I suppose, almost like fashion designers and interior designers, things like that. He's trying to build up a bit of a portfolio of kind of interesting stuff, and he's got a very idiosyncratic style. It's kind of got this slightly off-key kind of humor to it, but also this slightly, I don't know, it's just, he's got a very particular style, sense of humor. And this piece was for an interior designer to actually promote a lamp of hers, and she wanted to promote it in a way that was kind of a little bit unconventional. And so he came up with this idea to make this short film about a moth, and about this light bulb that basically is having all these affairs with different moths, and then falls in love with this one particular moth who's really beautiful. And then the moth ends up leaving the light bulb to go and find this very attractive lamp that is the interior designer's new lamp, basically. And so originally he made the whole thing, he shot it, and then he actually tried to get the rights to a Nina Simone song for it that he kind of edited the film to. But at first the Nina Simone estate were like, yeah, that's cool, like, you know, you pay this amount for it. And then I think Universal Music came back and were like, no, like, you need to pay us like hundreds of thousands of pounds to get this song.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the problem.
You're familiar with that, yeah, exactly. So he kind of ran into that problem, and at that point was like, yeah, no, F this. And then called me and was just like, look, like, I feel like this would be a good fit for what you do stylistically, and you know, I don't want you to like recreate this Nina Simone piece. I want you to just kind of take it and just see how you react to this film. And then that was it, really. And then we just developed this piece of music kind of together, because he's got some musical chops as well. And that was kind of how the process worked. Yeah.
I was going to say that so because you sort of know him so well and sort of knew him from the
Yeah.
past in the theatre company and stuff, and you, is it kind of a shorthand between you, like any sort of director and sound person? There's a kind of
Definitely.
shorthand, and you can work with each other easily.
Yeah, I mean, we're both really big film fans, so we kind of have and we've got there's a lot of crossover and kind of the stuff that we like as well. And I mean, he's into musically, yeah, like there's definitely a shorthand between us, but he's got quite like he's into very like old music, like old sounding music, like as in like music that sounds like it's like kind of been like dust, like swept under the carpet for a while. Like he loves like loads of like 60s music, but also like the vibe and the aesthetic of this kind of crackly record kind of sound. He wanted that, and that's not necessarily what I do or what I'm interested. But I having worked in sound design and theatre, I've got quite good at recreating certain sounds and aesthetics and certain kind of, I suppose, almost like the feel of another era.
Yeah, he kind of pinpointed what he was looking for.
Exactly. Yeah. He was just like, I want it to sound like you kind of could have stumbled upon it in like an Eastern European record shop or something.
Okay.
And he wanted me to sing on it, and he said, just imagine like you're like a guy and his wife has just left him in the middle of the night, and he's like drunk on schnapps kind of thing, and he just wanted me to like sing from that place. And and that, so we kind of, we had like a nice like back and forth, a kind of a language about it. And
am I allowed to play it?
Yeah.
Right,
Sure.
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks very much. Very good explanation. So I'll play that. We're going to hear that next. And that piece was especially recorded for that promotional film. And the piece is called Moth. My next question is, you've got an album out now called, because apart from your sound design, you're actually a musician, and you kind of make records. And the latest one, I think, to come out, I think my understanding is it will come out. Maybe it's because of the COVID thing, I don't know. But Basin is it called
Yeah,
Basin?
that's the next record.
And
Yeah.
I've seen some of the clips of it, and I can say that I know this program is basically about film, but you do tend to use some imagery when you're promoting certainly some of the songs from your work, and the recent ones for bass, they seem quite well, shall we say, elemental.
Yeah.
Kind of water, or kind of the sort of movement, and I'm wondering if the way that you, well, I'm sort of asking you whether the way that you create the music and the way that you, that kind of, does the image have anything to do with the way that you work?
Yeah, massively. Yeah, I'm really actually kind of glad that you're kind of the first person who has kind of said that, Rob, and actually like quite relieved, because that's actually very on point as to how this record's been coming about, and this, like you say, this kind of and using elements as a thing, because usually with this record at least, it's come about in a twofold kind of way. It's been really intuitive and really like just stuff comes out in a way of like, you know, I screw around for a while with sounds, and then like you just follow your nose, and this sound leads you to this sound. And so I tend to work with sounds and textures and production stuff first, and then a song kind of organically evolves out of that, rather than sitting down with a guitar and writing some lyrics and stuff like that. Is usually the kind of the meat and potatoes, or the elemental part of the music is kind of that's the stuff that I'm drawn to most usually. But then the second process in this record has been, I suppose, like working with a big theme in this record that's just emerged quite organically, is to do with it's to do with almost like the idea of like a natural, organic, very human emotion trying to be pushed through a bunch of digital, very false kind of MacBook kind of sounds, basically. And so the elemental side of that has been a real thing, because it's like, you know, there's elements of water and fire and wind and earth, and that kind of feel very natural, but are kind of coated, as I said, in this kind of very like false kind of like, you know, zeros and ones kind of vibe. And that very much is a kind of a framework, or that's almost the canvas for the actual songwriting and for the emotional content and for the narrative content of the album. So those are the kind of almost the like colors that I'm working with, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. I wanted to ask if, I mean, two things really that spring to mind. One is, I remember sort of hearing David Lynch recently talking about his creative processes of writing movies.
Yeah.
And he talks about diving, you know, he talks
Yeah.
about this deep meditative with Pierre,
Catching the big fish. Yeah.
Yeah. And he says, you know, he talks about diving. And so that kind of came to mind in terms of something that's sort of really deep, you know, talking about the emotional content. But also I was thinking about Grotowski and the theatre background, because Grotowski originally, which I shied away from as an actor, I have to say, but I could actually bring in here the fact that you also have an acting background. And Grotowski was the one who, I believe, who talked about coming from this very, very deep emotional center, and very even center, but feeling. It's all about the feeling, and there's sort of massive sort of thing, you know. And I used to frighten the life out of me, I have to say. But I don't feel any fear listening to music, I have to say. But I feel incredibly great. I feel a great sense of something, and I don't quite. I'm not quite sure what it is yet, but I mean, I came to see you. I think it was after your last album, which was called Roshman. I came to see you play, and well, we'll talk about that in a moment. But I mean, certainly the tracks that I've heard from the new album. I mustn't get away from the theme, which is on film. So,
Sure, yeah,
so
yeah.
these clips that you show with them. I mean, there's another thing which I was going to say, which because this world now, everything is moving along very, very fast. The way that we choose to show stuff visually, I say on film, that can include anything. And even things like, which are all we can all do now. We kind of put these bites on Instagram and these kind of ways of showing things. And you had kind of these promotional clips for this album saying about spreading the word. And there were all these clips of you kind of in traffic and stuff going up and sort of almost like the old school sort of report, Johnny on the spot reporter going to a car and giving somebody a cassette or whatever it was, and then on a bus or, and it was sort of, it's quite comedic, but what it does is it's showing this sort of lone figure, running out with your work and going out on the street, sort of doing the legwork sort of thing. Sure, and you show that on each clip. So obviously someone else is filming the clip and you're in the clip, but in itself, it's kind of a parody of what putting stuff on Instagram is, because you're not only spreading on Instagram, you're also going out in the street and handing it out, which I quite like actually, because it reminds me of the last effort to get Jeremy Corbyn in, where I went out in the street and talked to people and said, what do you think? It reminds me of that. Totally. So it's not saying goodbye to technology, but it's kind of working with it in some ways. And I wondered if when you made those little clips, though, what was going through your mind about you?
Well, it's funny because it's a similar process to kind of how I've said the records come about with those clips, funny enough, because like you mentioned the David Lynch thing, like the catching the big fish, the where the ideas come from. I relate to how he talks about how these ideas come about, because usually it's like the meaning is usually ascribed much later, and it's like, it's not that there isn't meaning, it's just that like in the moment it feels quite an intuitive impulse. And those came about when my partner and I got together, actually, that we were spending a lot of time going around London, and it was a really beautiful kind of period. And she just kind of kept seeing these like moments of, I guess, like some kind of absurdity, like when we were just going around town, and like just chances to capture these kind of strange moments. And this one you're talking about, like we were in the Barbican area, and we just gone to see a theatre production of Persona, actually, the Bergman film at the Barbican, which heavy. It was heavy, but it was incredible. And then she just saw this long line of traffic in the Barbican, and she was just like, my first single from my last album had just come out, and she just had this idea to like go up and like for me to like just go up and like play. Was
that Windmill?
That was Windmill, yeah. So she just said like, just go up to all the people in traffic and just play Windmill out of your phone to them, see if they want to listen to it. And obviously most people in their cars were like, just who is this guy? Like, what's going on? And it was great. It was I mean, there was just loads of shit. I mean, those particular series of videos.
Did you hit, can I just ask, did you hit pay dirt? Did you get some random, did you suddenly get somewhere? I'm a record executive. It's fantastic.
If I kept going, I'm sure somehow at some point, just by sheer probability, I would have bumped into the right guy. But I mean, I mean, Cassie, my partner, she's kind of a machine of these kind of ideas. So that was so the credit goes to her for those series of promos, for sure.
Right, okay. Now I want to come to another more recent piece which I saw, which is called Night Guys.
Oh, Night Guys, yeah.
And I was intrigued by this one because on the image, and it is explained actually afterwards in the writing if you read up on it. But in some ways, I don't even think the explanation is necessary. But there's a racing driver who's had a row with his wife and or his partner, and he's broken up, and the very that he is not just any old racing driver. I mean, he's won the world, whatever it is, in Le Mans or whatever, and Formula One. And the very car that he won it with, he uses to bolt to get away and to drive off into the sunset.
Leave his marriage, exactly.
Yeah, and in the clip we see this is accompanying this wonderful piece of music, and at the same time we see the images we see when it sort of goes across, is it the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco?
I think it's San Francisco.
It kind of takes off and everything, and I really liked it and stuff. But I have to say, I have to ask you, first of all, does I mean, I'll get, and I know, you're not that young either, but
no,
you're a lot younger than me. But I've never been into those video games with
video games,
gaming and stuff.
Sure,
is that part gaming, that film? Is that taken from a video game? Or how did you make it?
The racing drivers.
Yeah, the racing driver.
No, that was all. I made that all from stock footage, just on YouTube. I just ripped like this kind of royalty-free stock
found
footage.
Okay.
Yeah. It was just kind of, there's just those sites where you type in like birthday and then it gives you random footage of a birthdays.
Wow.
Yeah, it was just like I was in Austria with my friend Orlando, and so Night Guys is like this kind of ongoing, I call it like an open source collaborative project where like just this kind of ongoing pool of my friends, it's just the members always change and we're just always collaborating, making stuff. And it's kind of a chance to just make stuff that's nothing to do with what we do normally. Right. So this track, we just made this piece of music in this house in Austria, and then I just got this flash of this image of an F1 driver just like bolting it down a highway and he's just like really emotional for some reason. So I had the idea that he was leaving his wife, and I just was like, oh man, it's such a shame I don't have the budget to like make something like that. And I was just like, fuck it, I just like go on YouTube and just like rip a bunch of footage.
I've done that actually.
Yeah, exactly. There's that kind of thing. It was just
so you wrote the music first, obviously.
That was it. Yeah.
And the music, when you said it was a bunch of you together, did you make the music together and then you made the film?
Well, it was just two of us that time. Yeah, it was me and
Orlando.
My friend Orlando.
Exactly. No, I really like that. album that's coming out, we've talked a bit about that. Quite a few tracks on it that's coming out next year. The one before was Roshman. I say Roshman. That's in this incarnation, if you like to use one of a better word. The name of your alter sort of musician character is Roshman. Is who you are. And the first album, several sort of great tracks on it. Windmill, I think you mentioned, was the first single. And there was one that I was quite interested in, the little promotional film that you made, one called Celebrant.
Oh, yeah.
And I kind of, a few things I was wondering. There's a sort of, there's a scene with a sort of hand servants, or kind of like almost could be Egyptian or Arabian, sort of also young acolytes serving you, three young men, and yourself in a bath, and it kind of, but with that there was a kind of a birthing idea, some sense of it. It made me think of birthing, or made me think of Pharaoh, or something like that. And so again, it sort of touched something emotionally. There was something quite good there, and it's sort of unseen. This is not the sort of thing one sees. So, and it had a kind of almost feeling of slightly transgressional. I mean, some of those early films, I've got the name of the guy that goes to do the stuff with the stones and that in the 60s.
Oh yeah, I know
Black magic and stuff, and you know, and he had all these sort of characters. I can't remember his name now, but so it had a slight element of that, and a slight element of it seems to me. I mean, when you were talking earlier about the latest stuff, and this kind of onslaught of technology we have, and this onslaught of everything being perfectly packaged and digital and nice and wrapped and supplied for us, and we're sort of bombarded all the time, it seems to me. And in a way, in a similar way to you coming up with something that you felt was a kind of something different from that, or something to sort of almost push against it rather than join in with it. That earlier stuff, the Celebrant, that took me off into a sort of different world. And I really liked it, you know, because of that.
Old friend, small talk start. Long night, always kept. Bliss, unexpected sight. All the reasons why
again, did the imagery and the what to wear, what to envisage with the thing, did that come about? Did you write the song? Did you write the music first, and then sort of translate what it was about afterwards, which is what you mentioned
Well,
earlier?
that particular idea came from a friend of mine called Sam Fenton. He directed that one and kind of came up with the concept. The song itself was fairly devoid initially of like anything to do with what the video was about, but the song was a kind of, I guess the broad sentiment of the song was to do with a kind of it's just almost like, you know, a beautiful experience being assailed by inevitable doubts and, you know, like things that get in the way of having a very present experience. So that was kind of, I mean, there was a few other things going on in that song, but that was kind of a broad term for it. The video kind of fits in with that in a way, but, you know, again, Sam, he works in ways that are also, I would say, quite intuitive. So meaning definitely does kind of come from it, the way he works. But yeah, he works with images, very, you know, very immediate kind of intuitions and stuff. So I think he just saw the image of me being in a bath when he listened to it first.
Okay,
and
that answers my question. So basically,
yeah.
he listened. It was his take on what he heard.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, and then the next question is about some of the earlier clips from that album and some early performance clips I've seen. There's very much centered around they're kind of, again, this slightly surreal. There's very much emphasis on you, on the face, and you're in quite a lot of them quite close up, and they are often slightly out of focus, and various shadows and things, and doorways or things like almost ghost-like, you know?
Sure. Yeah.
And all the more kind of thoughtful to see. Is that kind of because the music and that, certainly that album, is it I don't know, it's a sort of projection on my part or something, but is it something to do with its big stuff being in your head, and it's kind of very much to do with the world that you find yourself in when you're doing the music and you're sort of expressing something that's very personal, or what's the deal with it?
Do you mean in relation to like the visual stuff?
Yeah, the visual stuff, because the visual stuff is, yeah. I mean, it's not, I'm not just talking about recording of live performance. I'm talking about, because, you know, one would assume that everything that you put out, I mean, I could be wrong here. In fact, I can ask you that as well. Is everything you put out deliberate? Because, you know, when I sort of try to make a film, I try to sort of think about everything, think very clearly about what's going out. And that was Basin, title track from your second album.
Like the first album was kind of like a chronicle of just like loads of disparate stuff that I'd done over quite a while. But like this next album is definitely quite deliberate, I would say, like, because it's kind of like I chose to make this new album. Do you know what I mean? Like, whereas the first one felt like I just been at Goldsmiths University making all this music and wanted to start a new project, and then kind of put it under this umbrella of Rochman. But then I did find a kind of a through line with it all. But yeah, does that answer your question?
Well, yeah, I think so. Just about the thoughts about what's asking about the thoughts about the imagery that you were using.
The imagery. I mean, it was all, again, in that period, it was very collaborative. I mean, recently it's been much more like the imagery has been from my head, like the bass and stuff you're talking about, is that I've been making those films directly in response to the music. But the first album, I was kind of interested in the process of collaboration because making the first album was such a solitary experience.
Yeah,
I wanted to kind of branch out, but that kind of had mixed results, if I'm honest. Like sometimes I was kind of happy with it, sometimes it felt like the kind of, I don't know, it was getting there was just so much kind of happening visually and auditorily and all this kind of stuff that it could be a bit like muddy. But yeah, a lot of that stuff I think was, yeah, I suppose it's, you know, it was always trying to find because it does, like I think you said the word surreal or something, you know, surreality can be a bit boring sometimes in that it just can be anything, right? It can be like, it's like when you're trying to explain.
Maybe it's because I don't understand it. I call it surreal.
No. I don't mean. I mean it's an appropriate word, but I mean, let's say if I was just trying to make it surreal, I think like I would find that process, you know, a bit like. Is like the thing of like, you know, if you have like a weird dream and you try and explain it to someone and they don't really care. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like I think the surreality of it is more just trying to potentially capture a just something in the air that you can't quite define with words or language and stuff, right. and you know.
Right. Well, that brings me to the question again. So that's something there that the air. Obviously, which is why you don't make music in the first place, perhaps. But we're now talking about manifesting it into some sort of film, you know, some image and images and things. No, that's interesting. I mean, what I'm also interested in the fact that before, because I know you before. You embarked at studying at university music. You did quite a lot of acting and went to drama school and did a lot of acting. And what I would say are not always by any means conventional theatre plays, but certainly theatre plays in four walls in front of an audience. And very good you were too. And I assume you still are. But what I'm interested in is, and I know some of that work, from my understanding, was improvised, etc. as well. But I think it's quite fascinating that somebody that has worked in an area where you're interpreting a script and where you're doing, you're sort of presenting something quite narrative based, really, and that whole world. You said, you know, you like films and everything, and that kind of whole world, it's a sort of slightly different side of you. I'm quite keen to know. I want to see how, because what I'm trying to say is that before, what you could see you in something which seemed quite a storytelling narrative, quite clear through line of something, and who you were conveying, what you were trying to, and what way we were sort of going with it and stuff. And then this work is very much an immersive thing, where, you know, a bit like the old days of LPs that all the old gets talk about, the old days of the album. You put an album on, man, you just lie down and so you just sort of swim into the album, you know. Your music's a bit like that. It's a bit kind of, you put it on, it sort of, which is, you know, which is a lovely thing, but it's just a slightly different experience. And I'm just intrigued to see how, you know, you made that not a jump really. It's almost like you did a sidestep. You go, well, I've done that for the moment anyway, and I'm going to do this now. This is something I'm interested in. I'm quite interested to see what happens in the future, really, I suppose.
Well, I mean, the next project I'm doing is a film. I'm making a film next. So that will kind of tie all of that together. What you're referring to, I suppose.
Oh,
It's not. I'm not going to be acting in it, but I'm writing and directing it and all that kind of thing. So there, yeah. I mean, I think.
Give us a job.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll keep in touch about that. For sure. But I think that thing you're talking about the kind of the transition between the acting and very narrative heavy beginning, middle, and end kind of way of doing things, and then going into this, like you're saying, kind of almost lateral, immersive, kind of maybe non-linear kind of, music making stuff. It's funny because it's like, that's actually been on my mind quite a lot recently, because with this next album, I'm actually kind of attempting to, and it's still, I mean, for most people, it's still probably going to be not very conventional in terms of narrative or whatever, but there is, I am trying to construct a narrative with this new album, and there is a kind of, I kind of realized a while ago that I think, like, when I try and make music, it's very much almost like I'm trying to almost make a film in a way. And I kind of get frustrated a lot almost at the limitations of songwriting and music making, because it's like, I think I kind of sometimes fall under my own, like, quite restless ambition with it all, and end up sometimes accidentally making music that's way too heady and way too, like, intellectual and way too, reaching for too many things, when it's kind of in this, form that is ultimately quite standardized. It's like, it's essentially pop music, because it's, it's 4/4, 3/4, begin, verse, choruses, even if you are doing weird things within that form, it's still fundamentally quite rigid. So, I feel like this record is kind of, at this point anyway, about as much as I can squeeze out of this Rochman thing, like right now, in that framework, because I just, I've just got so many ideas, like, film wise at the moment, and so that's why I feel like making the film next is kind of, it feels like a quite a natural transition into another thing as well.
Right, another medium, yeah. So lastly, I think it's all absolutely fascinating. But so if you don't mind, I'll play a few clips from different periods. And the other thing is, I want to ask you about influences. I mean, obviously, I'm thinking myself, Eno, John Cage, Bono, and then I think I mentioned to you, like, when I saw you live, it reminded me of Scott Walker, some of your singing, which I really love. And I mean, I say reminded me of it, just something about the rawness of how, whether it was emotionally or some of the subject matter. But anyway, it was great. So, yeah. Any influences? What are your sort of influences?
Yeah, they're pretty broad. I think that's, I don't know. I mean, like, Scott Walker's funny because I was making music for quite a few years. I hadn't heard Scott Walker, and then people kept saying, the Scott Walker thing, and then I finally, a few years ago, like, delved into Scott Walker, and then obviously I really fell in love with all of it, and have been, like, kind of obsessed with Scott Walker ever since. So it's odd. It's almost like, it's like, like when you meet almost like a soulmate, and you've kind of been making or thinking similar things for years, and then you come across someone who you kind of think like-minded. It's like, I think what I'm, it's comparable in some ways. Obviously, I've got, like, a bassy voice and stuff, and it's got like a scope to it. But I think really the influences that, I don't know, that I tend to fall back on most these days, actually, weirdly, are to do with video games, weirdly, and film. Like, because I grew up so immersed in video games to the point where it became quite like an emotional refuge for me in many ways. Like, in kind of difficult times growing up, like, it feels like
which kind of ones, like Half-Life or something, or
oh god, I love Half-Life. Half-Life is one of my favorites. What's
the one where they go robbing Los Angeles in a car and stuff, and they rob everything? What's that one called?
Oh, what, GTA? No, not so much.
Fun-loving criminals, but that's a band, I was confused.
Grand Theft Auto.
Theft Auto. That's it.
Not necessarily that. I mean, that's a great game as well, but it's Half-Life is definitely up there for me. I think there's a lot of Half-Life in the Rashomon music, but it's kind of, a lot of these things, just like, when you watch films growing up, and there's certain sounds and certain tones that elicit a certain kind of just emotional response. I suppose nostalgia as well.
Yeah.
The album Scott 4, that he's got that Albert Camus quote on the back of Scott 4, and it's like something like, a man's work is nothing but the slow trek to rediscover those 2 or 3 great simple images in whose presence his heart first opened. Weirdly, a lot of that, I mean, that comes down sometimes to like video game sounds for me, or at least just the feeling of being in those, some of those worlds. So, influence wise, sometimes, I mean, most of the time it's not that conscious, but there will be moments where I'm making something like, oh, this really reminds me of this particular vibe in this film as well. And the thing I've always been interested in is trying to recreate the garbled version of that in your memory. Do you know what I mean? It's like what you think it sounds like.
Almost like sense memory, almost like sense memory for an actor. Are you trying to recreate?
Yeah, like the method acting thing, exactly. So you're kind of trying to create this kind of strange, distorted version of how you remembered it.
Yeah.
But that always, for me, garners really interesting results.
That's very interesting. I mean, last week on the show, I was talking about... I decided last week to do film themes because we're sort of quite an easy thing to do for this show. And I dreamt up different things from different movies. And I was saying on it, I sat through a double bill of a couple of Bond films, because Sean Connery passed away last week. Yeah, but when I was a kid, I went with a friend. We were very young. And my mum was in hospital, and it was very, very serious. And in London, Guy's Hospital. So I suppose you could say, well, why wasn't I there? Well, I couldn't be at the time. But I went with my friend to see these Bond films, and we saw You Only Live Twice and Thunderball, I think it was. And we saw them again, because I was saying last week you could see the films twice in a row, and you could stay in the cinema and stuff. But that, I'll never forget that day, and my friend will neither. And we were 2 kids, and we were really excited and everything. And and they were Bond movies, but the thing is it was a combination of everything. It was to be able to get away and just completely forget about any worries and at home or worrying about my mum or whatever. I was just transported, in this very exciting world, So I think maybe I can equate, and maybe, I don't know, sometimes getting into the world of gaming is a bit like that, because you're off in there and nothing can touch you in that way.
Yeah, I mean, this is what my film is about. It's kind of explores exactly what you're talking about. It's actually kind of trying to almost unpack the nature of this kind of will and need to escape into these quite all-consuming worlds. And kind of, I suppose, that always seems to kind of correlate with something quite difficult, like you're saying, when your mum was unwell. It's like those worlds become particularly potent and interesting and important to you when your kind of whole world is coming apart. So it's kind of that's one aspect of this film.
Sure. But we talked about musical influences and things. So as it's the film show, a favorite film, or you can pick anything. It can be an art film. It can be I know it's almost impossible to ask, but
it's tough, isn't it? Yeah. Oh God.
If you could choose so many, a feature film or document, is there one film that you kind of think, oh yeah, I know there are so many, but you can choose 3. Okay. I'll choose 3. These are like the ones that I just always come back to. I mean, perhaps we could make it because we're talking about music and film. Maybe if we did something where we said a film that there's music in it, which also moves you, is it? Oh yeah. Okay. I think actually it's weird with this film. I'm sure there is music in it, but it's like I love how music is used in this film, but I can't actually remember even what it's like that much. But it's Wim Wenders, the German director. Yeah. Paris, Texas. Like. Oh, of course there is. Yes. Yeah. Well, that the movie you're talking about. Yeah. That's God. Oh yeah, he's a really famous. He's a very famous guitarist. Yeah. I love the guitar music in that film, and I think it's just that's one of my favorite films because it really represents one of
the things that I love about film is when filmmakers give you space to breathe in the world. Do you know what I mean? Like you really feel like you are in the ambience of it, and I feel like the music really helps with that in that film, because it's just kind of comes in and out and is really kind of just very, it's like he's just in the room with you kind of constantly.
Yeah, I mean, for the audiences, to explain to the audience, Paris, Texas is a Wim Wenders film, and it stars Harry Dean Stanton as a wonderful American actor who basically, I think his daughter, he hasn't seen his daughter, or
his son and his wife.
Is it? Well, isn't it Nastasia Kinski? Isn't that his daughter? I can't remember. He goes to find her, and she's working.
His ex-wife is a very, very young woman. Yeah.
Oh right, is it his ex-wife? Is it? He goes to find her, and she's working in a brothel, in Texas, I think. And oh my God, what's the name of the guitarist? He's really, really famous. Oh my God, Rick. Oh well, I'll find it. I'll cut it in.
Well, then there's
okay, so that's one of them.
That's one. I mean, this is a very obvious one, but like Jerry Goldsmith, specifically in the first Alien film.
Yes.
That opening sequence of that film is just like, it's just one of the best things ever.
I agree.
You must know this whole story. Yeah, I love the whole story of the fact that he originally, I think, got like asked to write something that was very sci-fi and mechanical sounding, and then he just he thought there was just nothing interesting going on about that, so he then went the other way, and then wrote this really symphonic, quite lush, almost romantic sounding thing, and that really contrasted interestingly with this really kind of dirgy kind of heaviness about like all the metal and stuff, and it was just so, because he said
this is the opening with the Nostromo, is it, where we see
with the Nostromo
in space,
and then the font of the alien is kind of coming up slowly, and then and he says something like, space is so, the reason it's kind of so scary is because it's so mysterious and so romantic in some way, and you were so drawn to it, so he kind of wanted to write the music like that, and it's just amazing.
Thank you. I think I'd like to play a clip of that, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
So okay, well we'll go with those two.
Yeah, great.
So Paris, Texas, guitarist, I can remember its name. This is Alzheimer's now. I'm getting it. And apologies to anyone who gets Alzheimer's. Ry Cooder, that's his name. Ry Cooder. At last it came to me. Ry Cooder, who's a sort of god. So Ry Cooder, and then Joe Goldsmith, who's brilliant. I think Joe Goldsmith did the Thunderbirds movies, didn't he?
Yeah, he did so many. Yeah, he was like super prolific.
He's one of the top geezers. Yeah.
But then, I mean, there's so many of them. Like Ennio Morricone.
Okay, well those two, two's great. Okay, well it's been wonderful to talk to you. I'm going to speak to a few other people as well on this program about music, so I'm going to keep you in. But thanks for coming on the radio show. This is the last one I'm doing, I think, so for the moment.
Cool. Yeah, no, it's been really, really brilliant to chat, Rob.
Yeah, it's lovely to see you. And
same.
Okay, well, I'll say bye for now then.
Yeah, cool. I'll speak to you soon.
seriously good radio. Available online absolutely everywhere.
Mum, how long till lunch is ready? I'm starving.
Well, it sounds like it's ready now. Oh, here she is.
Dave, I'm fed up with that blooming thing going off every time you want a bacon sandwich. Get the stepladder and take the battery out, will you?
Your smoke alarm is there to save your life. But a quarter of all smoke alarms won't work in a fire, often because someone has taken out the battery. No matter what, never disable your smoke alarm. After all, knowing when you've burnt lunch is a small price to pay to keep your family safe. Fire kills. You can prevent it.
So, my next guests on film are a consortium of musicians, let's say, who go by the name of Non-Blank, and they consist of Oliver Chera, Jack Hayter, Riz Maslan, and Darren Morris, who can't be here this evening, otherwise engaged. Sometimes a couple of other people. I think Simon Chatterton sometimes drums a bit for them, and I think Fritz Catlin bangs a cymbal now and again. But essentially, they're a group of musicians who have taken on the job of entertaining us when some amazing films have been screened at local cinema where I live. They sort of interpreted or reinterpreted a soundtrack for the films that we're watching. I spotted them, I think, first of all, The Great White Silence was the first one I saw, from 1924. It was a great movie. A chap called Herbert Poynting he was a photographer on Scott's trip to the Antarctic, and he managed to capture all this incredible footage. Not only that, but he survived because he was in the base camp, and the footage survived as well. So it's an extraordinary movie. Each of you individually are musicians in your own sort of right, as it were. All of you have painted sort of pictures. You've kind of done films with your music. That must inform everything you've done. Approaching these projects. And I think if you could, what I would like to do, if that's okay by you, I may in fact later on play of some of, if it's okay by you, play some of your work as individuals to sort of illustrate my meaning. But what I'd quite like to do now is kind of, if possible, to talk you through each film that you did, and one particular sequence maybe of each thing that you can perhaps remember, and sort of tell us what was happening on the screen, and then perhaps play the sort of music that you put to that. Would that sound useful?
Yeah, there's quite a lot of them.
Yeah, well, we'll just get a few snippets. So perhaps starting with The Cabinet of Dr Caligari. Any memories of that from anybody? Riz, for example, memories of the first one you did.
When he's carrying her up the steps at the end. I mean, it's such a beautifully crafted film, just from the way the sets are. It's just a beautiful piece. I think the whole film for me is one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's German expressionism.
Yeah, it's just beautifully done. And I think for us, it was one of the first ones where we actually gave the characters their own themes. And I think that's always been really important without really thinking about it. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. And then the other thing that, I think it was just, it's quite a dark film. And I think for us, it gave us a great opportunity to kind of play with that.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I think what was interesting is that we did it a second time at Latitude.
Oh gosh, yeah, we did.
Remember, at midnight in a wood. And that was really interesting because we couldn't see the screen, so we had to get a laptop on the stage and start the laptop at the same time as the cinema, the projection. So we were probably out by a second or so. I have no idea. It seemed to go down very well, but I remember on that there was a lot of stuff going on, particularly that night between me and Jack. We seemed to invent some sort of reel or jig or something in the middle of it. And still have it sound sinister, which was I remember a high point of that one.
And can you remember what you were playing? What instrument you were playing that evening?
I definitely had a violin that evening, and going back to the sort of your original question, I think Dr. Caligari was an ideal one to start with because Riz mentioned the idea of having themes for characters, and I don't know how much you know about. Actually, I don't know why I'm asking this. You probably know more about film theory than me, but the characters are very Propian. They're like characters from a folk tale or a fairy story. They're very defined characters. The narrative is very linear, and so it's kind of like a good one for sort of baby steps into live film soundtrack.
It was very easy to define those characters. We each had their leitmotif, and it was, as Jack was saying, it was a really useful introduction to that idea.
Yeah,
you know, we're not just making random noises here.
Yeah,
everybody knew what noise or what tone fitted a particular character.
Right.
And I think on that one, we divided them up, didn't we? Each person had a different major character to accompany, as it were. It was really successful, I think.
Yeah,
really
it was.
good.
I mean, certainly the first one I saw at the Kino, I saw that, which was excellent. Though then you came to this, the Great White Silence I mentioned, the Scott of the Antarctic, the real thing.
Yeah,
I mean, that must have just been mind blowing to work on that.
Yeah,
mind numbing, bum numbing. Yeah. I think is.
It was long.
It's a long film. It's a long film.
How long was it? I can't remember. It was
a
couple of hours.
Yeah.
I think it was great, and I think at least one person has told me that's the favourite one they've seen us do, but there was just a very long section with penguins in the middle of it.
Oh yes, I remember that. Yeah. It was too long. I remember that.
We're just making these slapstick music. Go on, Jack.
we from obviously we'd learned a bit from doing Caligari, and so we thought we would come up with a leitmotif for penguins or playful penguins. But of course, we didn't realise that like 2/3 of the film is footage of playful penguins or playful seals, and it was kind of getting tedious for us.
Yes.
More bloody penguins.
It made the ending all the more tragic, though.
Yeah.
I
just remember sitting there thinking, God, how many more penguins are there to go?
Is there a particular sequence, apart from the penguins, is there a particular sequence in that film that you can remember, and maybe you could find a bit of music for
me? Yes, because as you know, the footage sort of stops when the explorers go off into the distance. We never see them again, and so the end is done with a peculiar sort of overhead looking animation scene. And it, I think for me, I thought, how is that ever going to work? And yet it did. It was strangely emotional because you were so distanced from these ant-like figures on the screen, being sort of tracing their trail across the Antarctic snow, and I found that surprisingly moving, and certainly I think for me that was the best part of it.
So here is a clip from The Great White Silence. This features in part, it's like a sort of dirge at the beginning where the roll call of all those who were lost, essentially. And also there's a scene where we see for the first time this incredible iceberg, just beyond belief. I mean, don't forget this film was made in the 20s, so it's absolutely extraordinary. I can remember with that one just being really excited that I worked out how I could get this big old ride cymbal that I had processed through my modular synthesizer, and that was kind of, I had to be careful not to overplay it, but felt to me like the sort of the representing the silence itself, the frozen waste, as it were. I really enjoyed that aspect of it, but yeah, that was very difficult to just not play it all the time. Yeah.
One interesting thing, I don't know if you know, but at that same time, somebody else did a live soundtrack for Scott of the Antarctic. Was it Simon Joyner? And so, oh my word, I wonder how. I deliberately didn't listen to it. It was released on a record. Deliberately didn't listen to it until we'd done ours, and I felt that we sort of did better in a way because it was live and because it had more feel and because it didn't rely on black notes on a piece of paper and expensive orchestras. Not to denigrate his work at all, but I think there is something about doing it live that takes you back to the very beginnings of cinema.
Yeah.
And I know I always annoyed my family. I can't watch television without a guitar in my hand, just noodling away, and it drives them nuts. But I think that feel is going back to the roots of cinema, and
I think it's very interesting. I mean, the other day I was discussing with somebody about a couple of films that I've got feelings about and wanted to kind of sort of pontificate about on here, and wanted to do my own sort of analysis of them, and therefore say certain things about what they felt like to me. And I sort of happened to have a book on that particular film that I was thinking about, and the book is someone else's point of view, and it's very, very detailed and I started to read it, and I thought, no, I don't want to read their opinion because I have my own feelings about it, and I almost didn't want to or mollify or kind of take away the impressions that I felt and that I wanted to express in my kind of engagement with the film, sort of thing. And this is what I think it might be a similar thing for you, in that you're presented with this thing to do and you're there and you watch it, and then it kind of comes out of you, all the kind of experience that you have, and shared experience, obviously, about, how to react to what you're seeing on the screen. I think that's the interesting point, and the audience then benefit from that.
Well, and I think what better thing to. I mean, it's if you're bored by rock and roll and you quite like film, what better thing than to sit in a nice, comfy cinema with a glass of wine and watch a good film, interesting film with an interesting soundtrack, live soundtrack, and I think that it sort of sells itself, really.
Yeah, it does. But there's an aspect of this that has always slightly worried me. It came to the fore when we did La Belle et la Bête. Somebody I know, old school friend, came all the way from Gillingham to see it because it was her partner's favorite movie of all time. And you just think, oh my God, we're going to kill this thing for her. And thankfully on that occasion we didn't. But it has kind of worried me that the films we picked are the most popular ones, the sold out ones. They're all quite well-known films.
Yeah.
And you think, you know, we could destroy this film by getting this wrong.
That's true.
But I think those people who would be irritated by us putting a new soundtrack on a Hitchcock film, they're probably not going to come.
So on to the next one. How about this young Svank Major's 1988 animated feature of Alice? How do you say it? Liz, how do you...
Spankman.
Yeah, Svankmajer. Yeah.
Svankmajer.
The animated feature of Alice, loosely based on Lewis Carroll's Alice, of course, going down the rabbit hole. What memories of that one?
Well, it was actually one of Darren's favourite films, and it was him that brought this one to the table. So I think it's a shame he's not here.
Yeah. But
it's actually an incredibly beautifully crafted film, considering it's all done by stop motion. You know, it's a very beautiful film and very dark, you know. Yeah. It's very dark in the way that it's actually presented. But I think a lot of people, I remember having friends come there and they thought it was amazing because it also has a humorous element running through it as well because of the nature of the characters in it. And I think the way he's actually presented it. So, you know, the rats and her hair on fire. For me, it was just like bonkers. Yeah. The whole thing for me was a bonkers ride.
Yeah, it's like a sort of Clockwork Acid trip, isn't it? And my memory is that our approach was probably the most atonal one that we've done, wasn't it? There was lots of spiky rhythm, and Darren was quite savage with the piano, if I remember rightly. Oh, it's great. Really good fun.
Do these things sort of always build, or is it very much like the narrative of the film? They kind of build up with a story and then you sort of build up accordingly, or... I mean, apart from the penguins one we talked about before.
They vary a lot. They do vary a lot. Jack Riz, my memory is that we played pretty much all the way through that one, didn't we?
Yeah, because it had subtitles, so...
Yeah.
You didn't... I think there was stuff, wasn't there? Because he'd actually managed to create almost like a rhythmic element to the film.
Yeah.
With the... kind of mechanicals of
that's right work. Lots of mechanical noises, and we were able to work with that almost as if it was a rhythm, as I recall.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Carry on, Ollie. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, compare it to was it the last one we did, the Caretaker, the Pinter thing,
Harold Pinter.
It's so wordy, and it's all about space and silence, so we had to be really careful not to overplay on that one, and I think we probably played much less on that one. And the Svankmajer was much more like almost like an extended music video, and I think that we were pretty much making noise the whole way through it, each taking the lead and so on. So homing in on one particular bit is much harder with that one, I think.
Yeah, I was going to come on to the Harold Pinter one, the caretaker you did, because famously Pinter, I mean, did a workshop about Harold Pinter recently, and I think it was a bit more flexible than people realize in some certain things, but it's very famously about the pauses in between.
Yeah,
when he says something and then there's a silence. Okay, well, how long is that silence, and things like that. It's very important you get the silence right, etc. So that would, in turn, as you said, it would affect the music as well, because you're, again, as I'm trying to get to, is the fact that you're sort of sitting there almost immersing yourself in what you're seeing on the screen.
Yeah, totally.
And responding accordingly. Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, that film particularly, because of the performances, are just so mind-blowing. It's a three-hander basically, and the strength of the performances, I just got totally sucked in.
It's Donald Pleasance, isn't it? Alan Bates.
Oh my God, Pleasance just blew me away. The whole, and so for us, I think it was just adding like the cherry on the top, really, to what was going on. I think, like Holly said, the film, when we discussed it, we didn't want to overpower it too much, purely based on what was going on with the narrative. And it's a beautiful piece of film.
Stink. That's what he said to me. That's what he said to me.
You don't stink?
No, sir.
If you stunk, I'd be the first one to tell you.
Well, I told him. I said to him. I told him you'd be coming along.
When we started doing this, we started doing silent classics because they have no soundtrack, and were designed to have a live soundtrack when they were shown in a cinema. But we, that everybody's doing that because it's the easy thing to do. We then moved into using films with sound, seeking out films that had no musical soundtrack. But the Caretaker is interesting because there is a sort of musical soundtrack. There's a radiophonic kind of, it's almost like noises off. It's very, very subtle. It could almost be the house creaking. So we left that in and took that as our cue and kind of worked off that. Stayed as minimal as we could, but didn't change the flavor particularly that was already there. We just went off, expanded on it really. And so I like the way that film opens because you get a bit of that original soundtrack and then you get us and you get it at the same time and you can't tell what's what. You can't tell that there's a soundtrack there.
You see, I think all this is fascinating because to me, I keep thinking, I don't know why, I keep thinking of linguistics, and this whole thing about, inferences and utterances and how language is formed and how, so, you're operating on many different levels here, aren't you? You've got the performance, you've got the playwright, you've got, obviously the core of what it is. Then you have, the film, the whole filmic thing about what you're seeing, the mise en scène for the film. Then you have, as you say, that little sort of radiophonic stuff that's there that you noticed on. Then you have your enhancement of it, and you're bringing something of yourselves to it as well. So it's like a sort of stew, isn't it? Really, I think it's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure. I don't know what you think, Riz and Jack, but my feeling is that when we've been successful, it's when people have forgotten that we're in the room. So that when you look round and you see the audience are all looking at the screen and nobody's looking at us, that it's not about a performance with visuals. When that's happened, that has felt like we've had a success tonight, because it's we're supporting the film, and it's become something different because it's live and anything could happen. But I think it's about supporting the film.
Riz, you've directed a couple of Oliver's films, and you're a filmmaker as well, aren't you? So could you kind of give us talk us briefly through one of your individual work? I mean, this is aside from the non-blank things.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been influenced by film. I mean, when I first started out, I was using Super 8. I had a Super 8 camera, and I used to go away on tour and basically document my, a bit like a road movie, really. And that's how I started. I did a lot of Super 8 stuff. And then they stopped making the films, so you couldn't really do it anymore. It used to be really quite cheap to do it, and now it became a lot more expensive. And I then did progress to digital, but I don't really have the same love for that as I did film.
That's interesting, because one of my guests the other week, Gabriel Beristain, he's like does big, movies in Hollywood and stuff. But he started out in Super 8 as well originally, and I think a lot of people do. The colours were very rich. It was very something you could feel in your hands when you cut it. And
I mean, I think all of us are heavily influenced by the moving image, and I think that does play into all of our music. So
But I'm gonna definitely, I'm gonna say this now because I want to play. I'm gonna play "When We Shut Down," which is one of my favourite songs. That Oliver is one of your compositions, and Riz, you directed that.
So, we did it together. I mean, I filmed.
You both did it,
and we did it as a collaborative thing.
So I was going to ask you guys before, what comes first, the music or the film? Obviously, I'm presuming that the song was written first, Oliver. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it always would be with us, really. We're musicians first. And I mean, I can't pretend to be a filmmaker. I've made the odd video, but mostly it's just out of found footage and things usually. I've shot some things, but in
that case, it's set in, and this particular song I'm talking about is sort of set in a house, and it's basically, well, I should like to tell this story, but it's about somebody who's lost a relative.
The song is specifically about the idea of losing, a life partner late in life, and the, how unfair that seems, and that level of loss. So I'd actually seen an exhibition quite locally which addressed exactly that. It was an exhibition of photographs of an empty flat, and after it had been packed up after somebody had died, and it was really moving, and I kind of wanted to filch that. And we asked around and found, I wanted to find a little old lady's house that we could film in. And we did, but she wasn't a little old lady. She was very glamorous and active and dynamic, and had the most beautiful flat. But that's where we shot it. And in fact, in the end, she danced for us as well, didn't she?
She did. It was a beautiful thing, very moving experience. I really.
There's a very beautiful sequence, and I seem to remember that one doesn't know whether it was the character when she was a young girl, but it doesn't matter because it came across as if she was a young girl. It was the memory of her dancing, I think, when she was young, and it's a beautiful at the end, very wistful sequence.
But that, or if you like, that was improvised, arguably, because we didn't know she was going to do that. She had effectively had a dance studio in her front room. It was huge, and she used it for yoga sessions, I think. And she put a dress on and started dancing to the music. So we shot it, and that was just off the cuff, wasn't it, Riz?
It was, and it was instigated by her, and I just thought that was so beautiful. We couldn't not capture it.
Yeah.
It was the essence of her, as Robin said. It was like a memory, but it was her in the present, but it was a memory, and I really loved that. It just really worked.
Well, that's one of the great things about filmmaking is this sort of happenstance that I imagine was also something that happens with, as you guys you say, when you were performing live in front of the screens, happenstance, when things come together unexpectedly, and it's sort of an alchemy of everything together suddenly. And
I guess the trick is you learn when to spot it and grab it in the moment. That's what's going on.
Yeah.
I have to that just to add, that lady, what's her name, Hillary, turned out as we were, setting things up and chatting to her and so on. I think she was slightly suspicious of us at first, but we got on very well in the end. It turned out that she had been married to Harold McNair, who played the flute on Kess. On the soundtrack.
Oh wow, Ken Loach's.
She didn't know he'd done that. She was saying, "Oh yes, I used to be married to this guy, and he played with Donovan and so on." And we were suitably impressed. But then I thought, "Hang on, I know that name," and it was, and I was able to get hold of a copy of the album and give it to her, which sort of made the whole thing perfect for me.
RadioScarborough.co.
It was my understanding that you kind of threw yourself into it in a kind of improvised way. You'd sort of turn up and then do whatever you felt by what you were seeing on the screen and work together like jazz musicians.
They're all improvised. We pick a key. We sometimes talk about the mood of the thing, and we'll probably discuss what instruments we're going to bring. But that aside, it's pretty much improvised. Wouldn't you agree?
That's Oliver. That's Oliver speaking. So, Oliver, and what are the kind of instruments that you kind of bring along? What's the toolbox?
It's a big toolbox. I mean, there's all sorts, like percussion things, synthesizers, electronic stuff, pianos, keyboards. Jack brings a violin, lap steel, pedal steel. Riz will sing, and I mean, you even brought a guitar one time, didn't you, Riz?
Yeah, guitar, cello, flute.
That's right, the cello.
I think I read also that sometimes I read somewhere that you also sort of sometimes have found recordings or kind of influences from electronic or stuff that you've had around that you kind of thought might make a nice contribution. Is that
Oh yeah, I've got a little tape machine where I've actually played cassettes and then amplified it, and because it had a pitch wheel on it, so I could slow it down, which then you put through an effect. It gives it a really nice kind of layer of sonics, which I think works really well.
Well, Riz, you sort of traditionally, I think when you started out, from my understanding, you originally came from a background of working, is that right, on rave scene and stuff back in the 90s? Is that right?
In the 90s, yes.
And
I cut my teeth with Future Sound of London.
Again. You are what you do. A man is defined by his action, not his memories.
I did a lot of PAs to begin with, but then I only did that for a while, and then I kind of went off and wrote my own kind of music. And I think a lot of the way I wrote was pretty much about cut and paste. So it was originally like improvising music, sampling myself, and then kind of creating a composition. So quite an old school approach, a bit like what you'd have if you had tape back in the 70s. You chop bits up, slice them together and, hope for the best. And I think that's pretty much how I started.
Right.
Yeah. In my kind of path, as you would say.
And Ollie and Jack, I mean, as I mentioned earlier before, you both seem to me great storytellers.
Yeah, for me, anyways, the story is everything about what I do. The music's secondary, and I know when I do my own shows, my favourite part is the talky bit rather than the performing singer-songwritery bit. I think we probably all try and tell stories, but I suppose that means that everything you do has a sort of slightly cinematic feel. I mean, you're trying to paint a picture with words and music, and it's not just about words, is it? It's about having the backing that fits what it is you're trying to connote or purvey, and so an improvised soundtrack with 4 people who make music that way is sort of always going to work to some extent, and it is unrehearsed, and I'm glad it is, because I live up in Gravesend and they all live down on the south coast, and I turn up with a violin or a lap steel guitar or guitar, and usually I follow what Darren does on the piano, and we're all improvisers, and certainly Ollie and I have been playing together for a long time over the years. When did I first meet you, Ollie? About 1995 or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that. It's a long time, and you do get a sort of sixth sense about the mood of what you're playing, and I think we're all a bit like that. So that does lend itself to film soundtrack.
Radio Scarborough. Radio Scarborough. Radio Scarborough. Radio Scarborough. I would not feel so all alone with Radio Scarborough.
I was brought up in the same village, or very near the same village, where Michael Morpurgo set Warhorse, and obviously that's a glammed up, Baudelarized tale of a set of really tragic events, and it kind of made me. I went to see Warhorse and I loved Warhorse, but it made me angry in a way, because no, of course none of those horses came back. They were not the kind of cart horses were the tractors of their days, and when I was growing up, and the first pub that I went into was the Duke of York in Iddesleigh way back when I was about 15, and there were still old men who could remember the day that the army came to take their horses, and they were very bitter about it. So there's that part of the story, and then the other part of the story is that all those people are now dead, but there was an old lady who lived at the end of the village who very seldom came out, and there was a rumour that she had persuaded her brother, who was a conscientious objector, to go to war, or sort of embarrassed him into going to war by pinning white feathers onto the front.
A bit like, What a Lovely War, where they kind of say to the men,
that symbolism of the white feather. And she never married, and she passed away, and I sort of merged the two stories, but my agenda was to kind of give the lie to the Warhorse tale. Much as I admire Michael Morpurgo as a writer, and he does now live in that village, but it's one of those things where he'd spoken to the same people that I'd spoken to, and yet we come away with completely different stories.
The day they took old Bendigo, Walter was away. I fought them in the farmyard, but they took him anyway. And when the girl my brother loved pinned feathers to our door, he said, "You know I'm tired of fighting," and he signed up for the war. He said, "You loved that horse too much, you know I miss him too. So I'll take your love to Bendigo, yes, that's what I will do. I'm bound to see him out in France, our paths will surely cross, and I'll buy him back for Christmas, no matter what it costs." The power and glory they'll feel stories, but it's just dead boys in the mud and horse meat for dogs. I sent my love to Bendigo. Well, he came back without a heart and hardly ever spoke. Lost himself in working and drank until he broke. And he made himself the hard man, and he hit me every night. Then he hung himself on Christmas Eve. He did it out of spite. The power and glory, they'll feed you these stories, but it's just dead boys in the mud and horse meat for dogs. I sent my love to Bendigo. And if there is an afterlife, and I rather think there's not, Walter and old Bendigo would be ploughing up the lot. To look down on old Iddesleigh and tell me what I lost when I let my brother go to war just to find a horse. Well, it's club day in the Duke of York. It comes round once a year. There was a time when hundreds would march to drink good beer. In the days when we had horses and brothers strong as trees. A man's no good, a horse no good, a war's no good for man nor horse, and now there's only me. The power and glory, they'll tell you these stories, but it's just dead boys in the mud and horse meat for dogs. I sent my love to Bendigo.
And that was Jack Hayter's I Sent My Love to Bendigo on his Abbey Wood album.
So, Robin, I'm going to ask you a question, and it's how do you feel about vertical format? Because a couple of years ago, I was telling kids, well, you must turn your, if you're going to use a phone to take video footage, then you must turn it on its side, landscape format. And of course, they always forget, they do it portrait, and now they're the TikTok generation, and all of a sudden, vertical film format is becoming a thing, and it surprisingly
seems to work. Yeah.
Well, how do you feel about that as a cinema buff?
Well, yeah, I think somehow our brains are able to compensate for stuff, you know. I don't think it's my ideal, but I think our brains kind of go, okay, it's on vertical format, so we just, okay. So, I'm watching the telly now. I'm watching the phone now. And you just kind of get into it anyway, you know.
You get into it anyway if it's done well. And there is that whole thing about the constraints of a frame.
Yeah, forcing you to do something different.
A particular kind of direction. And it's just as valid. And initially I was so sceptical, but I've seen some great vertical format shorts.
Yeah,
recently.
I mean, I agree with you. I mean, I haven't seen vertical format shorts, but I've seen a few clips of things. And I thought, that's pretty cool. And I did kind of wonder, what the hell's, why, why don't do it like that? Well, that's because the phone's designed that way. Anyway.
Because of mobile phones.
Yeah.
Instead of going like that, we go like, I can't even do it.
It is. I do think it's a bit weird that we come from an era where the bigger the screen, the better. The big, IMAX.
It's not like that
and then you
anymore,
go and see
is
these
it?
great movies, and you think, wow, it's 35 mil. Oh, it's fantastic quality. Oh, the sound,
And now,
incredible Dolby sound. Or then people go, okay, well, I was watching it on my phone, and I enjoyed it. So yeah, it was really good. I watched it on my phone. You think, well, but I found myself watching the film.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
We all do it all the time. The thing that worries me is that I think that my attention span with the phone is not great. My attention span, though, with the computer, if I watch something on YouTube, is not great. The TV is better, and cinema, once the film started, I'm shutting up. I'm not doing anything but watching the film, and I'll sit there for 2 hours and watch the film. But I come from the 1960s. It's I haven't got used to the idea of vertical format. It still looks like mistakes or kids, TikTok footage to me. But that's not meant to sound like a criticism. That's mean. I'm not catching up yet. So I think that, going back to something you said earlier, that none of you are living in the past. I suspect that I've got at least 1 foot in it, and I kind of wish I didn't. But if I'm honest,
I think I've got both my feet in the past.
I really want to. I think. There've been some really interesting films recently. Riz and I have been working with Andrew Cotting a bit recently, and in fact, I think we all did one of his films, didn't we? We all did an Andrew Cotting short.
Is that the Swans one? No.
I know he shoots an awful lot of his films on his iPhone. Usually, he'll use like a Super 8 app to make it look like a Super 8 film, but he's completely open about it, and I think gets a fair bit of flack from your kind of BFI types who think that this is somehow sacrilegious. But equally, there's the guy, what's his name? The guy that did Bait.
Mark Jenkins. Mark Jenkins,
right.
Yeah.
He's
on my
went
Facebook.
Right back to basics and shot everything.
That was great. That was 16 mil. Clockwork, wasn't it, or something?
Dubbed the soundtrack on
a Bolex. He shot it on a Bolex.
Bolex, yeah.
Clockwork cameras, right? But then dubbed the dialogue on afterwards.
Yeah, well, I mean, my sort of mini sort of series thing that I did for YouTube is all sort of got it a camera from Dixon's in I think 2002 or something. Nobody wanted it. It's an old mini DV camera, So made everything on that. Sort of ran around, no crews, just me running around. And, I had great fun and all that. But I mean, as somebody said the other day, the thing is about you can make a great thing with great content, and you can make it on a handy cam, but essentially. Well, his was the opposite argument, really. He said essentially you've got a film made on a handy cam, but I don't know.
Yeah, but it clearly doesn't matter. If what you're making,
it's a great story, and it's
the Andrew Cotting films do not look like everybody else's films.
No. Was it the Whalebone box or something?
That's the Whalebone box is the one that we did, but they don't look like anybody else's films. And yes, you know that some of this is being shot on a camera phone because of the nature of the scenes. You're getting something quite different, and it's still great. It's obviously still great. That Whalebone box is a really compelling film that is hard to describe, but utterly compelling. And
you did the soundtrack on that, didn't you?
We did some of the soundtrack. We worked with him on it, really.
They had a deep attachment to place, but not to the specific structures that had been put on the place. And of course, the box was brought back to this household from which it had started many, many years ago.
And it was a very serious sort of life and death thing. Creating some sort of monster.
Well, I think, guys, I'm going to wrap up, if you don't mind.
Cool.
I've really enjoyed talking to you, and it's good to sort of unpack some of these ideas and things. This is actually the last program I'm doing on film. This is number 6, so it's the last one. And I've really enjoyed it. I'm going to probably do a special sometime in the future that I've got sort of that I'm working towards. But for the moment, I've just done these 6, and it's been absolutely fantastic. And thanks so much for coming on the show.
Cheers, Robin. Thanks for having us.
All right, then. Bye. Thank you very much.
Take care. See ya.
Bye.
Bye, Robin.